Shabbat Shalom. Please be seated. What a special morning. The great Hasidic Rebbe, the Baal Shem Tov, who was the founder of Hasidism, was told by the heavens that a great Jew in the neighboring town was incredibly pious and merits a most special place in heaven. The rabbi was curious to meet him, to learn from him in what ways the great rabbi himself could improve, and how to better mold and teach his own students and disciples to follow his ways. And so the Baal Shem Tov went to find this holy man. He was utterly surprised that this great man wasn't a rabbi, wasn't a Talmudic scholar, he was a bartender at the town pub. He thought to himself, how could it be? And so the Rebbe began his investigation into what made him so special that he merited this coveted place in heaven. The Rebbe noticed that before the bartender would sit down to eat his dinner, during his meager break time, he would leave the pub, walk down to the town's riverbank, cross an old rickety bridge, missing many slats, and carry a boulder, trying to balance himself so he wouldn't fall to his own death, back across the bridge. The rabbi asked the bartender about this curious behavior, and he answered, "Every day I ask myself, am I truly carrying out the will of God? And if God protects me as I walk this path, this is a sign of God's will that I will live." The story is brought to explain the verse in the Torah that we read last week from Parshat Achrimot, Ushmartem et chukotai ve'et mishpotai, asher yaseh otam ha'adam v'chai bahem ani Adonai. You shall keep my laws and my rules. You shall live by them. I am God. V'chai bahem, and you shall live by them. Rabbi Mark Asher Goodman from nearby Pittsburgh writes in his weekly Parsha commentary called Life Lessons from Recently Dead Rabbis that he was puzzled why God would reward what seems like a reckless lifestyle, endangering himself. So he brought this teaching to his weekly Torah study, and an older man at the table spoke up. His name is Joe, and he told this story about what happened to him on October 27, 2018, at the Tree of Life Synagogue, the morning of Pittsburgh's synagogue shooting. Joe said this, "I remember the man walked into the sanctuary. I looked at him. He was holding a gun. He looked at me. I was sitting in the front of the shul. For some reason, he turned away from me, walked towards the back of the synagogue, and began shooting." Rabbi Goodman writes on this conversation and this moment that he had at his Parsha class. Occasionally, we come to face to face with a situation that reminds us life is not one that we should take for granted. So while we are living, we are obligated to make meaning of our existence, to find our purpose, to take a stand, to do something better, because God wants us to live here and now. God chose each one of us to be alive, and like that bartender, like Joe from Pittsburgh, who came to shul one Shabbat morning, and just like we are today, v'chai bahem, remember that we are living and do something with it. This verse is the Torah's imperative for life, that we must break any commandment, any Jewish law in order to save another's life. On Shabbat, on Yom Kippur, there is no law that we wouldn't break, for there's no mitzvah than preserving another's life. Pikuach nefesh. Why? Because v'chai bahem, you shall live by him. And as the rabbis add, and not die by them. V'chai bahem, that law, that imperative, that you shall live by them, also teaches us to look for opportunities to do good in this world, and that Judaism's prime directive is to live, to not close ourselves from the world, not feel like Judaism is preventing us from living a full life, a life of meaning, but rather that we must live life in a Jewish way, filled with energy, enthusiasm, and joy, in order to better our world, not only to better ourselves. This Shabbat, we are celebrating Ben's bar mitzvah, v'chai bahem, you shall live by them. Ben, you're a young man who pledges today as our newest Jewish adult to live a proud Jewish life, to love Israel, and commit yourself to our people. And today we celebrated two of the newest members of our Jewish family, Elizabeth and Hannah, who've always had Jewish roots, but have affirmed their commitment, v'chai b'hem, and you shall live by them. And today we gave a Hebrew name and blessed and welcome Owen Sawyer, Ehud Tov, united for justice and for peace in this world. A year ago, I received an email out of the blue from two college students from Case, asking if they could meet with me to study in order to formally convert. On top of their busy class schedules, on top of working in labs, on top of leading campus groups, on top of participating in Hillel and Chabad, they met nearly weekly with me, learning, deepening their commitment to our faith and our people. Hannah wrote this about the experience, quote, "I've always gravitated toward Judaism. In 10th grade, my English class read Elie Wiesel's Night. Reading the first-hand account of the Holocaust reconnected me with my roots, empowered me to speak up against anti-Semitism in my school district. And as Hannah approached the mikveh yesterday, she passionately spoke about how Jewish joy sparked something in her that she always felt that she had but could never articulate. Judaism is now her compass, which guides how she lives, living the words v'chai b'hem, remember that you are living, live with a purpose." And Elizabeth wrote about a trip to Israel that she took with Case, and her desire in Israel to buy a piece of Judaica, jewelry from our Jewish homeland. While walking through Jerusalem's old city, Elizabeth, you wrote these words, quote, "I knew I wanted a necklace, but I did not yet feel ready to wear a Star of David. I decided on a green opal chamsa and wore it since then. But later, on a semester abroad in Germany, Elizabeth lost her chamsa. She knew she needed another piece of jewelry to celebrate her Judaism. You said that you wanted another one from Israel, since it felt holier, but you weren't going to be in Israel very soon. Just weeks later, Elizabeth visited Dachau, and she wrote this. While standing in the crematorium, where so many of our people were murdered during the Holocaust, you told yourself, now is the time to start wearing a Star of David. And on the way out of the concentration camp, she went to the museum store and bought herself a small silver Magen David, which she now wears every day. This is what Elizabeth said. It was a moment of Jewish power, proudly wearing the Star of David at Dachau when so many before could not. I felt like now the Magen David belonged to me as much as any other Jew. And it was at that moment that Elizabeth decided to formally affirm her Judaism through conversion. As we proudly welcome Elizabeth and Hannah and Ben and Owen Sawyer, each in your own ways, you reflect a phenomenon which is called the Star of David effect, the rise of public Jewish pride. Daniel Rosen wrote in Algemeiner just a few weeks ago, in the aftermath of October 7, Jewish people around the world have experienced a deep recalibration. Fear and shock have been replaced by resilience and pride, leading to a reassessment of identity and a recognition of purpose. This awakening has taken many forms: advocacy, social media, rallies, letter writing, WhatsApp groups. One particular striking phenomenon is the Star of David effect. This refers to the growing number of Jewish individuals, especially younger Jews, who are visibly and deliberately wearing a Magen David or a chai on their neck in public. What in the past may have been a rare, quiet, personal expression has now become a visible symbol of resilience and pride, a proactive way to take control back from the onslaught of negativity, of hate that we have been exposed to. The Star of David effect is not just a fashion statement, but it's a symbol of power, demonstrating bravery, making a statement that's worth recognizing. When every generation questions whether that next generation is going to carry on the torch of survival, we see the Star of David effect. V'chai b'hem, you shall live by them. Those are the words that teach us about Jewish pride, about Jewish survival, and about Jewish joy.
This week we saw another example of the Star of David effect. We witnessed what you could call as a miracle when Idan Alexander, now aged 21, the last living American hostage, was freed from Gaza on Monday after an astounding 584 days in hell in captivity. A dual American-Israeli citizen, Idan grew up in Tenafly, New Jersey. He was a Jersey boy, and after high school, he joined the IDF, serving in the Golani Brigade at the time of his abduction. Hamas kidnapped him from a base near Gaza on October 7th. While in captivity, his parents were among the most vocal, pleading for his return along with the remaining 58 hostages. And while Idan was held in the tunnels with little food, covered with scars, with bed bugs, with shoulder injury, his family in northern New Jersey celebrated his brother's bar mitzvah and prepared his sister to go off to college. Upon Idan's return to Israel this week, Steve Witkoff, the U.S. Special Envoy to Israel, who was a critical member of the team that worked for Idan's release, visited Idan in the hospital in Israel, and he brought him a very special gift. He brought him a necklace with the Star of David, and he told Idan this: "You would be doing a great honor to my own son if you wear this." The necklace had begun to Steve Witkoff's son, Andrew, who died 14 years ago at the age of 21 from an overdose. Until the day he gave it to Idan, Steve Witkoff wore it himself every single day. I'd like to share a reflection from a colleague, Rabbi Zach Truboff, who was a rabbi here in Cleveland and made Aliyah and lives in Israel. He wrote something very beautiful about that moment. If you know anything about parents who have lost children, you know how fiercely they cling to those small, tangible reminders of them. They don't give them up easily. They hold on to them because in a very real sense, that's all they have left of them. Yet there still came a moment when Steve Witkoff was willing to let it go, perhaps because he knew that by doing so, it would carry on his son's love into another life, offering Idan the things his son never got the chance to carry forward. A person of faith is someone who tries to walk in the ways of God, knows that when they arrive at a crossroads, faced with a choice that is agonizing, unclear, and perhaps impossible, God has already given us the answer: v'chai b'hem, choose life. His gift to Idan Alexander was maybe not just simply a necklace, not simply a gesture of comfort, but perhaps a quiet, defiant act of faith, a way of saying, even after death, I must choose life. I want something of my son to continue living. We don't always know what it means to choose life. Sometimes it means restraint. Sometimes it means resistance. Sometimes it means refusing to give up on the humanity of other people. I keep thinking about that necklace, its quiet weight, its history of love and loss, now carried forward by someone who knows something of survival, resilience, and captivity. I believe that Idan will wear it not only as a memorial, but a reminder that even in war, even after confronting death, our deepest task is not only to survive, but to carry life forward. And so we learn, v'chai b'hem, remember that we are living. Remember that we must find our purpose. Remember that we must carry life forward. Am Yisrael Chai, and Shabbat Shalom.